And one of the natural parts of communication is there's so much assumption. You don't realize it, but you just have to fill in the blanks all of the time because for the speaker to give you everything would just be so cumbersome. So we fill in the blanks. That's just how communication works. But when we're filling in the blanks with things that aren't helpful or may not be accurate, then we got to kind of slow down and start to recreate those assumptions.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. It's terrific to have you along as always. Kaleb Beyer and Brian Sutter are in the room with me here today. Welcome, guys.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be with you.
Yeah. So I pulled these brothers aside and say, hey, let's do a podcast on the speaker-listener model. Okay. Something that actually has been mentioned, and I'm sure more than one podcast, Kaleb, as you talk about marriages, speaker-listener, right? It doesn't get much more basic than speaker-listener. And I think, actually I know, having been familiar with our materials and the speaker-listener model and communication, that type of thing, my eyes have kind of gone hazy when this topic is talked about because it's been kind of like, yeah, I get it. Somebody speaks, somebody listens. What more needs to be said? This is a much to do about nothing, I think, right? And then I had a situation where I'm trying to help mediate a situation in a family, and in another separated situation between two individuals. And I engaged both of you, and both of you said, well, speaker-listener model, that's what you need to do. And again, I was like, all right, well, maybe I'll give this another try.
Is there really? Who else is available for ideas?
One person speaks, another person listens. But you unpacked that in a way that really gave me a model, and it was super helpful, really helpful in these situations. And really what I came to understand, it actually by doing this and being very careful with who's speaking, who's listening, it actually helped everybody in the room understand one another a lot better and ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So I thought, let's take another crack at this. So this is like take 3 for you, but take 1 for many of us. On the speaker-listener model. Okay, so that's my setup. Okay, let's talk about the speaker-listener model, and let's unpack it in a way that's not just working with people, but spouses, right? This is a great thing to do whenever you're having a hard time communicating with somebody. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
You set it up. Set up speaker-listener model. What are we talking?
I mean, and I think not only for spouses, but even just like parent-kid-child relationship, I think that would be another kind of context that I would say, and you may not even need your child to be in on it, but if you can see it through that model, I think it can be a helpful lens. And I guess maybe one thing that comes to mind here, Matt, is relationships. All of us would say, okay, relationships are important. Relationships are something I need to invest in, and that communication is kind of the pathway through which relationships can either go really well or really poorly.
Yes.
So if we're going to get something right, let's get communication right. And that's kind of in this space. And that's why I think it's really important.
Well, let's just pause there and appreciate that fact even more. You're absolutely right. If a relationship, at the core of relationship, is communication, verbal and nonverbal.
Exactly.
Right? It is a presence of knowing that, hey, we're sharing this space, and you mean something and I mean something and we mean something even more together, right? Isn't that relationship?
Yes.
Which is communication, Kaleb. So much of what you do with couples is communication oriented.
For sure. And I think in it, the reality of how much we are communicating, even when we don't realize we are communicating it. And I think an aspect of this speaker-listener model is, in some sense, slowing it down to realize there is a lot happening, a lot that we don't know. So, and for example, a spouse, when they're communicating to each other, I mean, we've heard the term 90% is nonverbal.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that happens outside of even words that is conveying a meaning and a message that sometimes we just fly right past or we assume we mean. And again, then we're off the rails or off to the races, and then the relationship is, ruptured, and that sort of thing.
That whole thing there, Kaleb, about slowing down is probably one of the biggest hallmarks of the whole model is it slows communication down, which can kind of sound frustrating a little bit.
For sure.
It's like, okay, I don't think slowing down is probably a good method on getting anywhere. Don't you understand, Caleb? I want to get somewhere with this person.
I got a lot to say.
Does that work in your car? Slow down and you get somewhere?
Yeah.
Right? Okay. But slowing down...
Yeah.
Say more about slowing down. Why slow down?
Yeah, it's a slowing down. And I think it's not just a slowing down, but it's a structured slowing down. Meaning...
It's a slowing down to allow for something.
Yes. Yes, correct. And in the slowing down, you have structure, right? So we're talking about the speaker-listener model is you have roles. And I know, and again, this can feel very mechanical, but the reason of slowing down is both the awareness of ourself and also the awareness of the other. And when you have structure also, that helps with regulation, right? Emotional regulation, if you think about it.
Yes.
And so both of those, I think, in some ways go together in this model is the slowing down and the structure that, again, feels pretty constraining when it's like, and mechanical when we first step into.
And I think one of the things that I think that we haven't said, but I think is important that you're highlighting here is that when we're talking about using this technique, we're generally talking about when there's tension or there's difficulty or challenge. We're not talking about, just kind of the high level logistic kind of conversations. We're like, okay, something's not quite right here or something's off. And let's kind of figure out what that is. And the slowing down can help us, highlight what that might be.
Yeah, so this is when communication is difficult, when you need to do an intervention.
Yeah.
In a relationship and communication is at a crisis, the speaker-listener model has proven helpful. So let's go through the steps. You said structure. What's the structure look like? Step 1, 2, 3, 4, however. How do you guys...
Well, I think first of all would be just to recognize there's two separate roles in communication. There's the speaker, the person who's communicating, and then there's the listener, that individual. So even just recognizing those different distinct roles and that each role has different rules to operate by, that would be at least a starting point.
And in order for that to happen, you have to have a clear delineation on who's the speaker and who's the listener.
Yes.
Because right there we go off the rails.
Exactly.
Because often we have two speakers.
Right. Yes.
And no listeners.
Yes.
And
eventually either you have two yellers or you have two that aren't communicating.
Silencers.
There's silence, and neither direction communication's happening then.
And so knowing that, okay, I'm in the speaker role means that I should be speaking right now.
And one of the challenges here, and this kind of goes back to the slowing down, is if you're in the speaker role to operate by a few rules, one of those being to keep what you're saying pretty succinct. It's got to be pretty short because the other person is going to try to summarize it. And our tendency is to go too long and try to get too much in, but then they may grab an aspect of what's been said, but not all of it. So keeping it short is a really important key.
And as a speaker, one of the things with it is really encouraging speaking from the speaker's perspective, right? This isn't a time to call out what the listener is doing wrong or blaming. It's actually, which I think is back to your original point of awareness, it requires the speaker to slow down a bit and seek to understand themselves in a way that's like, what is it that I really need?
Can you give us, Caleb, some prompts that would be good prompts and bad prompts or scripts to help somebody say, what do you mean by from my own personal perspective?
Sure. Yeah. So if there's a conflict between you and I, Matt, okay, I'm trying to think of a situation.
Should we make one?
I don't know. Let's yes, I
Come
can't.
on.
I'm glad I got an invite. Here we go.
So let's
Take just think of all those things he's done.
I know there's so many. I just don't know where to start. Just pick one of them. Just pick one of them. Yeah, let's go.
So I'm sure we've heard, we often speak about the I statements, okay? So that's a very basic, simple, but important from this aspect.
Okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
So say something about the I statements. What do you mean by I statements?
Well, when the speaker is sharing their perspective, when I'm using I, one of the things that happens is what we find is it lowers defensiveness versus me saying, you know what, Matt, you never clean up your office and it's frustrating. Yes, exactly. Right. And so automatically out of the gate, what happens when you hear you? I mean,
you know, the saying, a cluttered desk is a sign of a cluttered mind.
I've heard it.
You heard that?
Yes.
Well, what's an empty desk a sign of?
Oh, goodness. Yeah.
So at least you know, Kaleb.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
so
You and I, so you is accusatory.
Right.
So when you get off on the wrong foot, people hear, and that listener hears you and probably hears nothing else.
yeah, well, of course, because I'm like, you know what? I feel already misunderstood, and you want me to stay present with you and listen and try to understand you. And all of a sudden, my nervous system, my mind's already starting.
But when you are doing it from your perspective, saying I,
Yep.
do you stay more objective then? Or is it, you're able to speak to truth?
Well, I think one of the heartbeats of communication is trying to understand the other. If that can be our goal, to understand the other. So if I'm speaking from my perspective, then hopefully you're able to hear where I'm coming from. You're understanding my perspective. But if I start off with you, Matt, this is what I'm automatically doing is telling you, I think you're the problem and you need to do something different. But if I start off with, hey, this is my concern, or this is what I'm feeling, or this is what I'm thinking, then it can move into understanding, or it's more likely to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's really helpful. So we're going back to the structure piece. You've got a speaker speaking from their vantage point.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, you're saying one of the rules is to be succinct.
Yeah, because our tendency sometimes is, especially when there's conflict, you can have a lot of opinions about what needs to happen, or, okay, I don't get their ear very often, so they're going to hear it all. And then we tell them all the things that we've been frustrated about, or all the things that haven't gone well for the past month. And again, they're defensive now, or they haven't heard anything there that I'm saying. Mm-hmm. They're just bringing up their rebuttal. Mm-hmm. But if it's like, you know what, last meeting, Kaleb, when you said this, I felt, then we've got a specific thing that we're talking about. You're like, oh, okay, keeping it short.
Okay. So the listener, what is their job or role?
Yeah, their job is to focus on the message they're receiving from the listener. So
from the speaker.
From the speaker. So sometimes actually with listeners, I'll have them even have a pad of paper, or if to jot down some thoughts. But I think the important thing about a listener is you can tell me, a certain message or content, right? But the way in which you say it conveys a meaning. And so part of the listener's role is to reflect back that meaning, right? Because there's something that happens between the two of us that neither of you or I necessarily know if we don't bring it into the conversation.
So there is a way for them to do that in this model.
Right.
Right? So the speaker speaks succinctly, and then the listener has an opportunity to reply.
Yes.
And their objective is to simply say, this is what I've learned or heard.
Exactly.
This is what I hear.
Yes. Not, oh, this is my perspective on that point of view.
It's not my
right?
rebuttal.
That's often what we go to, a rebuttal.
They want to move into the speaker role, and so it's hard to stay in the listener role.
Yes.
They'll get their chance, but to start off with, okay, it sounds like you're saying whatever, is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you think about it, back to the roles piece, it helps, I think, for the listener to realize, you know what, I'm going to get my opportunity, right? The structure piece. And so it helps me be more present and be focused on what is it that I'm receiving? What is the message I'm receiving from the speaker when I'm in the listener role? So
give us a flyby of what this cycle looks like.
So at a high level, you've got the speaker, and they're going to speak from their perspective using I statements, trying to keep it fairly brief, and then they'll pause, and then the listener will say, okay, I think I heard you say, and try to summarize what's been communicated. And then at that point, then the speaker says, yeah, you got it. Not quite. Let me try again, or not at all. I'm going to kind of restart. And that's kind of one cycle through, and you're likely going to be talking about lots of cycles through that.
So that speaker then has an opportunity to evaluate whether they felt heard or not.
Right. Yes.
That's really the nature of it, right?
Yeah. And if they feel like they've got it, then you kind of keep the conversation moving. And okay, here's the next step, or here's the next part of it. So you're not covering a lot of ground, but the hope is that there's understanding along the way, and then you're switching roles.
Which is to that point, right? That is, I think, not covering a lot of ground as far as what we're talking through, but covering huge ground in the sense of understanding.
Yes.
Which what we know about the ability to be able to be in relationship and be responsive to each other. Sometimes conflict comes out of not feeling understood.
And conflict almost always undermines trust for the other. So when you've got a lot of history of like communication not going well, trust is very low. And this is a way, hopefully, to slowly start to build that up. And then you don't have to do the exercise, every time long term. But initially, just to restore trust, it can be pretty important.
And so that listener then, as they repeat back and say, this is what I learned, it doesn't mean they agree with it necessarily. And that's probably an important point.
That's
right?
really important, yeah.
It sounds to me like you feel disrespected.
Yeah.
And not to say, I'm not disrespecting you. There's a hairbreadth between that and your wanting to go a different direction, right?
I think that's a place, Matt, just as you put your finger on that it's easy to get hung up, because it can feel like for the listener that if I reflect back what they're saying, I'm agreeing with it in the sense that, yes, it's true, compared to it's true in their reality, right? I'm not saying, yes, it's the ultimate truth.
Yes, yeah.
But, I see how that could be true in this situation. And that's what I'm validating. That's what I want to convey.
And that probably is the
sense.
trust piece that you spoke of, Brian.
Right, exactly. And then if we can do that, what we're then able to do much more effectively is empathize with the other. If I realize that you felt disrespected, Caleb, if I realize that, I was like, oh, okay, well, then your response makes a lot more sense. I'll get a chance of telling, like, I didn't mean that to be disrespectful. But if I get the sense of it was for you, then I can at least empathize with what that would have felt like.
Yep.
So here's one of my ahas. And that is, sometimes relationships fall into such patterns of broken communication that they don't know how to right set the cart. And I feel like this kind of right sets the cart in some structured manner. And what I mean by that is, as I was watching this play out in real time, and I would have one person repeat back what the other one said, and the other one was satisfied with that interpretation. I wasn't.
Yeah.
I was an onlooker. I was like, no, I wouldn't. Don't be satisfied with that because I think they missed the point. And then when I raised it, neither one really knew. And it seemed like the speaker lost the point as well, because they were so accustomed to the way they do it that they almost had different ideals and objectives. When a person has never been understood, they don't even go for understanding anymore, right?
Right. Yeah. And that's where, like, so the listener, it's fairly easy to just parrot back the words that have been communicating.
Yes.
To get the content right, you can do. But I think what you're talking about is being able to say, not only to get the content accurate, but like, what was the intention? What was the meaning? And if you can capture that, that's really what we're going for. And that's a layer deeper that's actually pretty hard sometimes when you're in that pattern to even know what it is, either direction. And to have an outside party say, well, I think this is actually maybe the heart of what you're trying to say. Oh, I think you might be right.
Yeah. what couples, and I'm using that broadly, could parents to children or spouses, could be boss to employee, pairings. What pairings will this work for? What needs to be their goals and what needs to be some of their temperaments in order for it to work? You've done this with lots of people. For whom is it most successful? And for whom is it a loss because they lack this thing, this quality?
Well, it seems like, my first thought is that I've seen it most often not be successful when the pattern of communication has been very long-standing and very poor, and they try to do it on their own.
Okay.
That's where you find yourself. You're probably going to need to invite an outside party to kind of be that just observer and help provide some feedback. That would be one caution that comes to mind.
One is just the ability to be able to have perspective taking, right? It does require a level of, like Brian mentioned earlier, empathy, to be able to be in a place that I can empathize and connect with another. And we know, I'm thinking of certain situations and circumstances where that's challenging just because of makeup or neurodiversity. Certainly is something that sometimes that looks different. It doesn't mean it can't work, but it does look different.
That's interesting.
And
let's take that same category, Kaleb, which I really appreciate that neurodiversity in the sense of some don't, empathy is really difficult for some.
Well, I should say a different type of empathy. They empathize, right? But the ability, but it's different in a way to actually take
another's perspective.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Is really hard.
Yep.
The way you're sharing there too just makes me think maybe one of the other prerequisites you might say is just to go in with, I just want to learn. If you can, that would be like an ideal kind of starting place. Like, I'd like to learn what it is, what is their perspective, what is it they want, what is it that they're frustrated with the other. If you can start there, this actually can be really effective in helping fill out that space for you. But a lot of times we're not really interested in learning. We're interested in defending our own position.
Yeah.
And with that, I think just sometimes it is helpful if there's been conflict or an ongoing pattern or like a situation that happened to have some space for it to step into the conversation, because if not, part of it does require some ability to regulate emotion, to be able to be present enough, be with the other person.
And to follow the rules. Otherwise, we're just going to have the same argument a second time. And so that self-regulation piece, but also sometimes some space from the difficult conversation, right, that we had. And so sometimes is there any tactics you use for providing clarity in terms of roles or the rules for that person that struggles to stay in bounds?
Well, sometimes this doesn't necessarily answer your question directly, but I do think sometimes I physically have individuals hold, like the speaker holds something or the listener has a notepad. So there's a visual reminder that, we're in this kind of thing, right? Because this is new, it's different. If not, sometimes those physical reminders are a helpful cue to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm in the listener role here. And so I back it up and that sort of thing. I think the other thing is just the opportunity to talk about, just like in other situations, of how do we slow this down and take a break, right? Or when it gets to the point that, we're no longer engaging it, right, in a way that it was intended. What does let's come back around look like?
Everybody says, boy, this is awkward, it doesn't feel natural. And so that's often one of those barriers. So just going in knowing like this is gonna feel like a different pathway of communicating, but that's really the goal. What's been going on, particularly maybe in a tough conversation, is not working. So we're gonna try something different, and it. Part of the purpose is it's going to feel awkward.
Well, and you know what? Even that, it requires a commitment from both parties to enter it, which if there's a moderator, they help with that.
Right.
But if there's no moderator, that needs to be worked out.
Yeah.
Right. And two, I would say maybe even just giving yourself parameter on how long you're going to do this. Let's do this for 20 minutes. And you know what? I'll try to take the speaker for 10 minutes. You'll take it for 10 minutes. So you don't feel like you're going to be there all night. There's a little bit of a time like, okay, I can do this for 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think this is kind of going off of what Brian said about the awkwardness. You think about it, and it is awkward. It's uncomfortable. It's back to what you even shared. Like, this is so basic, really? But think about any new skill that we learn. The first time we step into something and begin to learn it, it is uncomfortable. And I think part of it is to embrace and let's stay with it. Mm-hmm. And it's the staying with it and moving through it. And often even being able to adapt it in a way that works for you as a couple, but find out what's helpful as you continue to have conversations in that.
And I think too, one of the things that I've observed this is just normal day-to-day life and conversation, as I observe individuals that I feel like are good communicators, I hear them doing this just naturally in their conversation. Mm-hmm. Like they're in the listener role and they're like, I'm not sure I understood that. Like, what did you mean by that? Or
this is what I understood you to mean.
Yeah,
is that true?
Yeah, exactly.
How would you change that?
Mm-hmm. And like, oh, there it is. And you start to see it, how it actually could look in kind of day-to-day conversation in a natural sort of way as you observe people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. This preset that a person might have that simply says, I don't understand, and I'll let the speaker tell me when I do, which is a grace.
Yes.
And as a mindset that I think, I don't always have, right?
Which is it takes a lot of humility to do that. And one of the natural parts of communication is there's so much assumption. You don't realize it, but you just have to fill in the blanks all of the time because for the speaker to give you everything would just be so cumbersome. So we fill in the blanks. That's just how communication works. But when we're filling in the blanks with things that aren't helpful or may not be accurate, then we got to kind of slow down and start to recreate those assumptions.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Well, thanks, both of you. I think, anyway, I was awoken to really the power of the tool and saw it really work well in practice. And anyway, so thanks a lot for sharing that. And I trust, to our listeners that this could be helpful. In the show notes, I'll put some links to some helps that might help further express this idea. Perhaps you have somebody in your life that you would like to engage this with. It might be something to share too, resources that way. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
See you.